Welcome to the Reimagine podcast. Each week, give yourself 30 minutes and meet the people working hard to create the future of insurance today.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of the Reimagine podcast. Laura, Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. It's our first podcast of 2021, and who better to have us join today is our friends over at Symetra.
Yeah, and just to say a word of thanks, and also and we'll talk more about this, but great community in Hartford, and we've really built our innovation program and our incubator around collaborating with community members. We're not trying to hold secrets, any kind of secrets back around innovation. We think by working together, we all get smarter and benefit the community. And one of those carriers in the community that really raised their hand early on and supported us with probably the most important resources they could, their time and their energy and their ideas was Symetra. And so we'll get more into that, but excited, we're excited to announce a partnership earlier this year. It's continuing into 2021, and we'll say thank you a little bit more on that front. But Laura, do you want to do the introductions of the team we have here today?
Sure. So joining us is Harry Monty. Harry is the EVP of Symetra's Benefit Division, and he's responsible for everything from the medical stop loss, group life, and disability. He's been in the industry for nearly 30 years. So Harry's expertise is one of the things we find most valuable of the relationship. And he's been a great part of the advisory board for Reimagine and just a friend to the industry. So Harry, welcome this morning.
Thank you.
And also Stephanie Simon's the Director of Innovation and Culture at Symetra. She's part of the innovation team called Spark, which supports and enables the digital transformation and fosters innovation throughout the organization. Stephanie's also very focused on the culture within the company and making sure that innovation is brought to the employees at every level. So it's been wonderful and exciting to work with Stephanie on the partnership as well.
Yeah, well, first off, Harry, thank you on a number of fronts. I think your partnership has been exceptionally valuable for our program, I think, as well as for a community and the startups who are on our program. So first question I'll ask, which is, why does Symetra care about innovation in the Hartford community?
So I guess, first of all, let me say Happy New Year to you and everybody. And thank you for having us. Really looking forward to the conversation. Why do we want to invest in the Hartford ecosystem? It comes down to a few things from my perspective. One is that, Symetra has been growing their presence in the Hartford area for a number of years now. And we always want to be a very active member of the community and the things that are going on. And this was a tremendous opportunity for us to do that. The second one is from my perspective that, an investment in the startups is an investment in the insurance industry. These folks bring some very unique solutions to the table that are going to allow, Symetra to grow, but also other carriers to grow. And probably most importantly, bring some creative solutions for our consumers, for our customers, right? We all know the customer has to come first. And so I think the startups bring just tremendous, value from that perspective. And then the third and probably the most important from my perspective is an investment in our culture as a company. So I just love the way the startups think. It's very different. It allows my leadership team and others in the organization to think about what's possible, which is really cool and brings a lot of value. And I guess bonus reason, isn't it just the right thing to do, right? If we invest in these startups, we all get some value out of it.
Yeah, I think giving back to a community, giving back to people, feels good. I think it's insurance companies are about supporting community, so I think it's great. Just back to the culture question, Harry, and I'll put you a little bit on the spot early in the morning, which is I totally agree with you. Culture is amazingly important for companies to do something. Do you come up with an idea, and does it get lost in a committee or a process, or project management never comes out the other end? How do you measure? How do you think about progress in bringing different culture into a company? Is there a scoreboard you have for doing this at Symetra?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll start, and then I'll ask Stephanie to comment on this, because this is her focus every day, is bringing an innovation culture into the organization. And is there a scoreboard? I'd say no, right? It's really hard to quantify, but when I can categorically say that I see my leaders thinking differently, when I see them not being stuck in the way that we do things today, and just bringing fresh ideas to the table. I think we've made progress. There's clearly other ways to measure value from these relationships, right? You could, the number of POCs that you kick off, right? Whatever you want to use. But I think the bigger and broader value is the culture aspect, and I think it's going to come down to just you'll know when you look around one day that people are thinking differently, because things will accelerate and you'll be doing more for your customers. So, Stephanie, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, of course. This is the heart of my work, so I appreciate the question. And I like doing this work because it is really hard work. I've done strategy work. I've done communications work. I've done a lot of planning work in my career, and the culture work is what I enjoy because it is harder to measure. But it is so critical, and it's particularly really critical in innovation. We often focus quite a bit on technology and innovation, which is also important in understanding what's going on as far as technology trends. But one of the reasons I've really enjoyed this partnership is the recognition about, let's intentionally think about culture and how can we influence culture and all of the, both internally, but externally in the community. And we've designed the programs around this. I'd say in terms of measurement, I'm actually taking a larger stab at that this year. So it's timely for me. In the past, some of the ways it's been measured is through storytelling, and just having people tell those stories about what they learned, what sparked for them, and what they did about it to both be influential for storytelling and for role modeling. But this year, I'm exploring some actual measurement, something called like a behavior change percentage, or something where you can actually try to quantify those intangibles. So surface those, but also quantify what that looks like. So stay tuned. I'll let you know how it goes. We're actually targeting specific types of behaviors like agility, collaboration, customer centricity, getting clearer on what are those behaviors too, so that you can target and measure.
Sounds like that'll make for a great Q3 podcast. We'll have to have you come back and give us some insight into that, because I'm sure there's a lot of listeners who are interested in actually quantifying that. It's a question that we get asked, is how do you measure success? And like you said, it can be through storytelling, culture plays, et cetera, but to have actual numerics around it, I think is going to be very interesting. So stay tuned for Q3 on that one, Stephanie. But I guess to dig in a little bit farther into the culture piece of it, you talked about why Hartford to some degree, but why NASA and why NASA Reimagine in particular? Is there something that stood out to you that said, these are people we want to, work with. They're doing wonderful things, if I can, say so myself. But why NASA and why NASA Reimagine?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it all started probably 3 years ago with an introduction. I'm an active member of the Connecticut IFS organization. That's part of the Metro Hartford Alliance, and Susan Winkler, their executive director, introduced me to Paul. And it kind of took off from there. I think we clicked in the way that we think about innovation and about giving back to the community. And I have tremendous respect for what the folks at NASA have done to invest in this program. And I think that our values are very much aligned. Tremendous respect for both of you and what you pour into this every single day. Incredibly creative, and just bring a tremendous amount of value to the ecosystem. And one of the things that I really love was the way you're approaching it. It's accelerators are great. They bring a tremendous amount of value to the startups. I like the way that you approach it from an incubator standpoint. It's a longer term support system for the startups, and it feels very grassroots. It's creative. You change direction when you need to create more value for everyone, and that kind of resonated with me, and that was a choice that I made to make sure that we invested in what you all are doing.
No, I agree, Harry. From the get-go, it was you and your team been terrific to work with. It's something you just a theme you raised around community involvement and sort of the model of doing this. doing innovation. One is I absolutely I would say we've checked the box that this is a long-term process. We internally ran a solvathon, Laura. When was this? March. Right. Week 2, we had people already wanting to know what's scorecard. Stephanie, how did this work? Well, it took us probably, I guess, probably 4 or 5 months to actually make the first investment in that thing. Small first round investment. Okay, how do we help them get more money? Now we've just kind of helped them get in front of an angel group. Okay, this is stretched on a year, Harry, close to a year, with our involvement. So I think, it shows persistence and long-term thinking really matters. But your question around models and community, how do you think the definition of community changes now that we're all on Zoom, we're virtual, we're probably not going to be in the office for the next year? How do you define community?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think everyone's definition of community has shifted from being geographic to being more relationship based. And that has really worked on tools like this, like Zoom, or whatever technology you happen to use in any given organization. And I actually think it's brought a really interesting advantage to folks, right? Everyone's on the same footing. You don't have people that are local in the room having a conversation. It's hard to break in. You don't have folks that get more exposure because they happen to be, sitting down the hallway. I think it's put everybody on an equal footing, a level playing field, if you want to say, and allowed organizations like yours to have a broader reach across the country, frankly, across the world, right? With startups and allowing them to be engaged without incurring a tremendous amount of expense for travel. So, it's one of the good things that has come out of having to work virtually all this time.
No, I agree. I think we're learning, probably every week here on how to do this. Stephanie, you mentioned stories and the power of storytelling. I think storytelling is really, really powerful because it gives people, a model for or path for success. I think of in Australia, the native tribes. This is an interesting true fact. I didn't know there are actually multiple languages spoken in Australia. They all learn songs or poems they sing at the fires. They all uniquely understand them, and those songs actually are navigation across the desert. So if you learn the song, you learn how you learn the story, you learn how to navigate across the desert. Harry, what's the story you'd like to tell, at the end of the year for our partnership?
I'd bring it back to the culture aspect of it. I mean, to me, the story is shifting our culture toward innovation and accelerating change in a way that people are more comfortable with. So, you talk about being able to navigate the desert. I'd love people to be able to better navigate change and navigate how to do things differently. So that would be the story I'd love to tell.
Yeah, and if you were to just, if we're sort of pulling that thread, I mean, what exactly is coming from the partnership? So you mentioned culture. What else would be on that list? This will help us, by the way.
Yeah, if I think about what value has come from the partnership, some of it you can't quantify yet, right? It's there are those intangibles out there, but I'd say at a minimum, we've strengthened our relationships with peers in the industry. There are a lot of folks who are very engaged in what you're doing, and so we have gained exposure to strengthening those relationships that I think are tremendously important. I'll come back again to leaders thinking about what's possible. I've already had a few instances of leaders in my organization that have established relationships with startups coming back and saying, "Well, what if we did this?" And it's not always necessarily exactly what the startup's product is today. It's a concept. And so, to me, that has tremendous power. They're not all going to work, but it has tremendous power that people are thinking about what's possible. And I also like the fact that we're approaching the relationship with startups differently. And you've heard me say this in conversations several times, so probably tired of hearing me say it. But I feel like the insurance industry has really approached the relationship with startups and innovation a little bit backward over time. It's been very inefficient. Usually these relationships start with somebody getting an introduction to one of the startups, and people go to others in the organization and say, hey, this startup does X. How can we plug that into what we're doing? And that's incredibly frustrating for the startups, because a lot of activity spins up and a lot of it doesn't go anywhere. And what I'm trying to do is flip that conversation over, build relationships, and put the business issue or the business problem first, and then work with the startups. There are some incredibly bright, talented, experienced people that have developed these startups, and have them help us solve a business problem so that we understand the fit better before we spend a tremendous amount of time on things like designing a POC that might not go anywhere, or just making sure that their solution really lines up with what we're trying to accomplish. So I think that's one of the ways that we can, as an industry, really benefit the startups, is to change that dialogue and come at it a little bit differently. That's what I'm trying to drive.
Yeah, and you mentioned that too. So it's people within the industry for decades in some instances. A lot of the startups we work with have been in insurance companies for 10, 20, 30 years. So when someone hears the word startup, they may think, a tech intense individual who may be in their 20s or 30s. And that might be true in some cases, and it might be not true in others. So I think looking at the definition of a startup and the individuals behind it will help feed into that experience aspect. So Stephanie, I'm curious, since you get to do this work day in and day out, you're one of the lucky few. What's a piece of advice or some advice that you'd give a colleague that you've learned from working with startups?
I have to say, I just think this has really helped me reflect on our journey to date when this conversation. And I have to say that I had only prior to this seen one other corporate take on having an accelerator or incubator program housed within their building. And I went into this with kind of an interesting, I'm not located in Hartford, so coming into your building and seeing your boat building, and then seeing when we were in person, and then seeing all that you had set up there, really was kind of eye-opening for me to see this corporate to corporate. And I'd say what I've learned through the journey is it has been very interesting and unique to have the synergy of having, when you did have the folks in person, to now see how you're doing this community building remotely. And I will say that it's been almost an advantage to be out of area, in the sense that I have been able to participate more in your programming and really get to know the Hartford community from a distance. So I would say capitalize on that when we actually go back to in person, is keep that broader community engaged that has been able to engage with you remotely. And I will say a couple other perspectives from being in a corporate innovation role is most corporate innovation organizations tend to partner with accelerator programs. And those are brief and intense engagements with startups that sometimes are lasting in an investment or time. What I really like with this incubator model, which I was also kind of coming in to see how this would work, is that I feel like these relationships may be more sustaining for both your program and for our side. And the relationships that we have with the startups feel like they're going to be more sustaining, because I feel like there's a way to really get to know them. It's not a time pressured activity like an accelerator is, where you have to prove something very quickly and you're in a competitive environment. So I feel like there's more sustainability here. I also, I'm excited by the relationships we've started with our leaders in the mentoring program we have with the startups. And exactly what Harry is talking about, I'm also seeing. I'm seeing sparks. That's our team's name, right? I'm seeing sparks of ideas where it may not be exactly what the startup is offering today, but as you've talked about, Paul, opening up the eyes for the startups to see this broader opportunity space in insurance that may be beyond where they've targeted. I'm seeing lots of sparks on both sides of possibilities for the startups to look at other avenues within insurance, and sparks on our side where our leader is seeing something. It's not exactly what we need, but it plants the seed of an idea. And we really want to see those things germinate in some way. So I don't know that I answered your question, but I had a lot of thoughts that came up from the prior conversation.
Yeah, actually, Laura, if I could build on that for a minute, if you talk about advice, because one of the things that, in addition to putting the business problem first, which I already mentioned, one of the biggest mistakes that I know I've made in my career in dealing with startups, and I'm sure others have, is don't fall in love with your own idea. If you go into these relationships with one idea about what the solution needs to look like, I think both parties could potentially, sometimes it works, right, but could potentially waste a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of capital. I know the startups don't have a lot of resources and capital, and they appreciate really figuring out pretty quickly whether something is going to work. But I would suggest to everyone, because I've experienced this personally, that a lot of times they have a better idea than you do. And so, allowing that creativity to flow, you may very well end up in a better place.
Yeah, innovation is a strange, hard thing to do, right? What looks like innovation to some people, they'll say, "You got to be kidding me! This is this is making the flywheel run a little faster." For some of them, it's like and I've seen you, Harry. I've seen you startups. They have wonderful ideas. If we were the Starship Enterprise of insurance companies, If I had a team of data scientists and I had connections with my systems and yes, I could take your problem and plop it here. So, it's a hard conversation to have. And Stephanie, I think the biggest challenge I have on my list and Laura's is to figure out what exactly is the model that kind of delivers long-term value without spending an enormous amount of money. And I think a lot of these innovation models are all morphing, changing, being challenged. Harry, you kind of alluded to maybe it's not that efficient to take a giant net, drag it across the earth, pull it back, and say, here are the startups I found. Companies, did I find an oyster? Is there a pearl in the oyster here? However, you accidentally can pull people in who are very talented on this. I think. This is going to be you're on an adventure with us here.
It is a journey
as we dial it in here. So I guess maybe we shift, Laura, to discussion around partnership benefits to date. And we've kind of been on this followed this discussion thread a little bit here. I guess what are the partnership benefits to date? What did you want to achieve? Do you have any examples or stories you can share right now? And maybe build on, some of the things, Stephanie, you've mentioned, or alluded to. Harry, do you want to?
Yeah, I can jump in first. I mean, we covered a little bit of this. That from my perspective, the value that's been created so far has come down to relationships, both with industry peers and with some of these the startups. We have a mentorship program going on with a number of the startups in your incubator, and I think the conversations have gone extremely well. Everything from helping some of the startups create a value proposition for a different part of the market that they never thought to try to get into, to conversations about actually using some of their solutions to solve some of our business issues. And so from my perspective, it's going really, really well. But again, it's that culture aspect, and that's going to take time. That's going to be the real payoff from my perspective. And one of the other things I know we've talked a little bit about is that it's a little bit unique for a couple of carriers to get together like this and go down this path. Carrier to carrier relationships are a little bit unique. I think done well, they're a win-win. When you look at the values and how we approach things between Nassau and Symetra, I think they're very much aligned. So there's no conflict, and it feels natural. So from that perspective, I would say that Symetra is learning the value of finding a partner that's very, very much aligned, and making a carrier partnership work, and it's a win-win. So, Stephanie, do you want to add any other value points?
I would say a few things. One is I didn't know going in the reach that you both have in not only Hartford, but the Northeast region. So I feel like as a person who does scouting as part of my role, that I have a much better understanding of the insurtech landscape, both in Hartford and, the partnerships you've developed with New York and in Boston, has really helped me being at a distance with looking at the insurtech space more broadly and fintech. So I've really appreciated that. I've also really just appreciated that I feel like your skills are all complementary to ours. So we're, I think, bringing a rich set of skills to the table and knowledge base to the table. And you do such an awesome job with events and thought leadership in the space and the combination. And the events really build community. It's not just events for events' sake. It's events to further our collective knowledge and thinking, especially the more in-depth retirement events you did in December. I thought were really well planned and orchestrated. And I can certainly see us seeing a lot of benefit from the thought leadership in the partnership. And I would say that Harry making this investment in the community and this investment in the partnership has been just a role model example for what we'd like to see. In general, it's sometimes the innovation team kind of pushing that agenda, and it was really Harry saying, "This is something I really want to do to support Hartford, and how can we, as an innovation team, help him reach that goal?" And that's ideal. That's more of the leader taking that role on and us supporting that to make that happen. So I'm really excited about that, and hope we can do more of this. I think on the culture front, what I was very interested to observe is what, from a person who thinks about what really does change culture, I was curious whether the startup involvement would, beyond the benefit back to the community, which we want to support the Hartford ecosystem, what influence would interacting with startups more directly have in terms of the culture piece. So we're starting to, as we've talked about, see that there really is a benefit for the investment of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you had mentioned, the word collectives come up, and wanting to, not only share network, but sharing relationships and building a community together. Because as you said, when we all grow this together, it's larger, it's thriving, it's better for everyone. And I think that's a piece of what we do and how we've really kind of created a little niche in the Hartford community, is having our doors open all of the time to not only collaborate with Symetra, for example, but for other community partners, and then the benefits that we've seen across the board. So we, going into 2021, want to just keep expanding and growing on that piece. But before we end the conversation today, I think it'd be valuable. You had mentioned very briefly the mentorship part of it. So I know that we've had some interesting conversations about how we wanted that relationship structured and what we wanted it to be. So Harry, I don't know if you want to make some remarks to that end.
Yeah, I think that those types of relationships are critically important to a startup as they get going, right? So, having someone to bounce ideas off of, really giving perspective on customers in different segments of the industry. But yeah, I almost refer to these more as sponsorships than mentorships. And I've come to not necessarily like the phrase mentorship when it comes to our relationships with the startups, because I mentioned before, these are some really experienced, bright people. And let me tell you, everyone that I've talked to, they're a heck of a lot smarter about what they do than I am. And so, to me, it's a two-way street. I've learned a tremendous amount from the folks that I've interacted with about how certain aspects of what they're doing work, whether it be, data science and analytics, whether it be some other technology approach, whether it be some type of, customer interaction tool that they've brought to the table. I have learned a ton, and to me, it's a two-way street. So we've had some really cool events around this that I think have deepened those relationships. And then, we've been able to have multiple leaders in the organization go off on their own with these relationships. And it's been really fun to see where they go. Some of them have gone down the path of exploring doing something together. Some of them have gone down the path of true kind of advisory. I'm talking to a particular startup about creating a value proposition for the group insurance part of the industry that I have the most experience in. So it's every relationship is going to be different, but I think just critically important to the success of startups as they try to grow and really get a foothold.
Yeah, well, listen, thanks so much. This is a great positive discussion to start 2021 off on, and great way to end a Friday. So, thank you for all you've done for us, Harry, Stephanie. It's been a big deal for our program, and I'd like to thank you on the behalf of the startups involved in our program because, Harry, the doors you've opened are tremendous. If I were a startup, oh my gosh, to get this much time and this much energy at this level of a company is worth a lot of money. So I don't know, Laura, any final thoughts before we close?
Sure.
Questions?
Simple question. So if someone's listening and they're interested in learning more about Symetra and the work that you do, what is the best way for people to contact you?
So they can always reach out to me at my email address, which is pretty simple, harry.monti. Monti, as you can see there on the screen, at symetra.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Anyone who wants to continue the conversation in that fashion, I'd be happy to do so. So again, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you in your program and just tremendous value from my perspective. So thank you for everything you're doing and really appreciate you having us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It has been a very valuable relationship to date, and I'm really excited and looking forward to 2021 and eventually returning back to the boat building sometime, hopefully later this year.
Yes, I agree. So anyway, listen, thanks so much. Thanks to our listeners. Again, reach out to us, give us feedback on the program, and any guests you think we should pull in from either the Hartford community or the insurance at large. Hey, thanks.
Great. Thank you.
We want to especially thank today's sponsors, Launch and Symetra.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more great information about this company and other great startups at imagine.nsre.com.